I'm going to play a little game with you. It's one of my favourite games that I play with church names. I have this theory that the names that churches are dedicated to somehow reflect the character of the church. Okay? So have you noticed that St Mark's are often outward looking? And they're evangelists, maybe in a bit of a hurry. I used to go to a St Mark's in North Horsham, in Holbrook, and certainly the St Mark's where I grew up was definitely in that sort of space. Think of some of the churches you might know from your own history and also from our own area. What about St Peter's? Big and confident. St Mary's? Quite often worshipful and traditional, I think. St Paul's? Big into teaching. Think of things like St Paul's Hammersmith. See, it works. And there was one in Medway called for St Philip and St James. It was a terribly friendly church. It was the church that all the young people liked to go from that particular area of Chatham and the Medway towns. Always known as Pip and Jim. Still is. Very friendly church. I know it might sound a bit frivolous, but actually there is a bit of a serious point in this. Because in the Bible, names matter. Names are signifiers of character and of calling. And the obvious one is from Genesis. Abram becomes Abraham as he is called into a particular task by God. So, as I was reflecting on our patronal festival, it really made me think about the significance of St Cuthman. When we read about the lives of the saints, it's very often to inspire us and to somehow encourage us in our Christian lives. And that's the modern saints as well as the historic saints. You know, many will have read of Jackie Pullinger in Hong Kong, or some of the older stories of things like the Cross and the Switchblade, but also the modern stories of people like in China and those sort of modern saints. We read those stories and they inspire us both in our faith and sometimes into action as well. Now, I'm not going to tell you the full story of St Cuthman's. You can read that. There's some stuff in the magazine this week, and there's also, you can look on the website, Steyning Museum, and it's got lots of details. But basically, there's the story of him pushing his barrow with his mum in, and it breaking, and this being the place it broke, and him saying that as he went, saying where it breaks, where it stops, I stop. And I will build a church. There are other stories and things through it. There's disputes about whether he was a poor farmer or a wealthy farmer or a member of the aristocracy. In a sense, that is completely irrelevant to what I want to think about. Cuthman, our builder, we say, each Sunday when we remember him. Cuthman, our builder. And when I was looking up on the details of it, I came across this prayer, which I think is not only St Cuthman's prayer, but is a prayer for our moment as well. And this is the prayer of St Cuthman. Father Almighty, you have brought my wanderings to an end. Now enable me to begin this work. For who am I, Lord, that I should build a house in your name? If I rely on myself, it will be of no avail. But it is you who will assist me. You have given me the desire to be a builder. Make up for my lack of skill and bring the work of building this holy house to its completion. Amen. The key thing I think we need to focus on today is that he was called to build a church, this church, and that call is one which echoes down the centuries from this church. We are called to build a church, this church, in this day and for this time. And how did Cuthman hear that call? To hear that call, we have to put ourselves in the place where we will be able to listen to God. And we heard that also in our Old Testament reading. Jacob was open to hearing God's call. Cuthman did it through prayer. There's a stone apparently that he sat on in his field near Chichester, where he prayed, where he made himself open to hearing God's Spirit, just as Jacob was open to that dream of the angels going up and down. And as we seek God's call for us and building our church in this time, we need to open ourselves to him as well, in prayer, to listen to him. Now, hearing isn't always a terribly comfortable process. A stone pillow on hard ground. Jacob, listening to God, if you listen to other parts of his story, wrestled, was left with scars. Following God's call on his life was not easy. Cuthman was travelling many miles, caring for a sick and elderly relative, physical work, pushing that chair that he'd made. As we hear God's call to build our church for this generation, we have to recognise that it won't always be easy. But just as Cuthman did when he got here, he stepped out in that prayer. He did what he was called to do. He didn't do it in his own strength, though. Those words in that prayer, if I rely on myself, it will be of no avail. However many human skills we have learned, however much we rely on our own capabilities, if we do it outside of God's will and outside of his strength, we will fail. He must have been daunted, but he didn't let it stop him. And I reckon he must have been a great team leader, actually, because he didn't try to do it all himself. Always makes me think back to Nehemiah and rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. Nehemiah brought together this huge team of skilled stonemasons and architects. And for Cuthman, there would have been carpenters, there would have been people digging out the ground and the foundations, things that he'd had no idea as a shepherd, a farmer, of how to do. Good team leaders know when they haven't got all the skills, but they also need people to step into that space. His deep reliance on the Lord allowed him to found a church that has lasted generation upon generation, from the early or late 7th century up to now. Might not be his wooden structure, but it's his church, in the same way that we are his church. So as we're looking to find out where we need to be, what sort of church God is calling us to be here now, we need to listen. And I know the PCC, for instance, have been doing that. They went away on an away day of prayer and have been talking it through. That's how we listen to God, through each other, through our own prayers, through working it out together, which I'm sure Cuthman did. So that we can begin to pull together a vision that we will build into being over the next few years. And we will no doubt be part of that long history. But by building our church, we're building a church for future generations, just as Cuthman did. It could be daunting, but we don't have to rely just on ourselves. And as we recall to mind our builder each Sunday, let's also call to mind our call to build his church. Shall we just pray that prayer together now as I read it out again? Pray that prayer for here and for now. Father Almighty, you have brought my wanderings to an end. Now, enable me to begin this work. For who am I, Lord, that I should build a house in your name? If I rely on myself, it will be of no avail. But it is you who will assist me. You have given me the desire to be a builder. Make up for my lack of skill and bring the work of building this holy house to its completion. Amen.